The sun was gently setting in the sky, painting the world in warm colors. The soft orange light spread over the quiet street, making everything glow peacefully. It was the end of another calm day in the small town where everyone knew everyone. The houses, shops, and trees seemed to shine as they were touched by the soft light of the evening. Emily Hartley was walking along the sidewalk. She was in her early 30s, but there was a quiet strength about her. Though she couldn't see the world around her, she walked with confidence. She didn't stumble or hesitate. Her steps were firm and steady, guided by the strong dog by her side. Her sunglasses covered her eyes, hiding them from the world, but they didn't hide her presence. Even though she couldn't see the beauty of the setting sun, it didn't seem to matter. She moved forward, and anyone who saw her would feel that she knew exactly where she was going. At her side was Max, her service dog. Max was no ordinary dog. He was big, strong, and looked like a protector. A German Shepherd, his coat was a mix of black and tan, and his sharp, alert eyes were always looking ahead. To anyone watching, it was clear that Max was more than just a pet. He was Emily's guide, her eyes, her guardian. Max never strayed from Emily's side. He didn't chase after birds, bark at other dogs, or run around like most dogs would. He was focused, his full attention on making sure Emily was safe. The people in the town had seen Emily and Max many times before. To them, she was just a blind woman who lived a quiet life. They didn't pay much attention to her as she walked by. Some might have thought that her life was simple and uneventful because she couldn't see. They might have felt sorry for her or thought she needed help, though they rarely offered it because she always seemed to manage just fine. In their eyes, she was just another face in the crowd, someone who went about her day like everyone else. But what the people of the town didn't know was that Emily and Max were not ordinary at all. There was something very special about them, something that no one in the small town could have guessed. Emily had a past that was filled with incredible strength, and Max wasn't just a regular guide dog. They had both been through things that would surprise anyone who knew their story. They were much more than what they appeared to be. As they walked down the sidewalk, the town around them quiet and calm, Emily had no idea that something unexpected was about to happen. She couldn't know that this peaceful evening would soon change, and that she and Max would find themselves in a situation that would test everything they had ever been through together. The people in the town might have underestimated her, but by the end of this day, they would realize just how wrong they had been. Emily and Max were about to face a challenge that would show everyone just how strong they really were. Emily's life hadn't always been this quiet. In fact, there had been a time when her world was full of noise, activity, and responsibility. Before she lost her sight, Emily had been a teacher. She loved her job. She worked with young children, helping them learn to read, write, and explore the world around them. Her classroom was always filled with the sounds of laughter and learning, and she found great joy in watching her students grow. She had a passion for teaching and a natural ability to connect with kids. Every day brought new adventures in the classroom, and Emily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. But then, one day, everything changed. It started slowly. Emily began noticing that her vision was becoming blurry. At first, she thought it was just a temporary issue. Maybe she needed glasses, she thought. But as the weeks went by, the problem got worse. She went to the doctor, hoping for a simple solution, but the news she received was devastating. Emily had a rare condition that was causing her to lose her sight. There was no cure, no treatment that could stop it. The doctors told her that eventually, she would be completely blind. The news hit Emily like a ton of bricks. How could this happen? She was so young, so full of life. How could she go on teaching if she couldn't see? How would she manage her daily life, let alone her career? The thought of losing her independence was terrifying. For a while, Emily felt lost, as if her whole world was crumbling around her. But she wasn't the type to give up easily. Slowly, she began to adjust to the idea of a new life, one with outside. One of the hardest parts for Emily was leaving her job. She had to say goodbye to the classroom, her students, and the career she loved so much. It was a painful transition, but Emily was determined to find a new way to live. That's when she was introduced to Max. Max had been trained as a service dog for people with disabilities, but he had an extra layer of experience. Before he became a guide dog, Max had been a canine officer. He had worked with the police, helping to track down criminals, find missing people, and even detect dangerous substances. Max was a hero in his own right, with years of service behind him. When he retired from the police force, he was trained to work as a guide dog, and that's how he came into Emily's life. From the moment they met, there was a bond between them. Max was more than just a helper, he became Emily's partner in everything. He guided her through her new life, helping her regain her confidence and independence. With Max by her side, Emily learned how to navigate the world again, how to do everyday things like grocery shopping, walking through town, and getting around on her own. Max gave her the freedom she thought she had lost forever. As they walked down the quiet street that evening, anyone watching would have seen only a blind woman and her dog. But what they didn't see was the strength that Emily had found in herself, the resilience that came from overcoming the challenges of losing her sight. And they certainly didn't see Max for who he truly was, a retired police canine with a past filled with bravery and heroism. The air was cool, and the soft breeze rustled the leaves in the trees lining the street. Emily could hear the distant sounds of people finishing their day, cars driving by, doors closing, and the occasional murmur of conversation. It was peaceful, the kind of evening that made everything feel calm and safe. But peace and safety can be fragile, and sometimes danger appears when you least expect it. Emily didn't know it yet, but something was about to happen that would remind her and Max of the strength they carried within them. As they neared the end of the block, Emily felt Max slow down just a bit. He was always aware of their surroundings, always watching for anything that might be out of the ordinary. She trusted Max completely. If he slowed down, there was a reason. She couldn't see what was ahead, but she knew that Max would guide her safely, as he always did. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the street. Emily could feel the warmth of the day fading, replaced by the coolness of the approaching night. It was getting quieter, and the streets were almost empty. But then, in the distance, Emily heard the sound of engines, loud, rumbling engines that broke the peaceful silence of the evening. She wasn't sure what it was at first, but as the noise grew closer, she realized it was the sound of motorcycles. A group of bikers, by the sound of it, and they were coming her way. Max's ears perked up. He was alert, always ready to protect. Emily didn't feel fear. She had Max, and with him by her side, she knew she was safe. But still, there was something unsettling about the loud, aggressive sound of the approaching motorcycles. It was a stark contrast to the peaceful evening she had been enjoying. The motorcycles came into view, though Emily couldn't see them. There were 3 of them, loud and fast, speeding down the road. The riders wore leather jackets, and their bikes were shiny and powerful. They looked tough, the kind of people who didn't care much about rules or respect. As the bikers approached, they noticed Emily walking slowly along the sidewalk with Max. To them, she was just a blind woman with a dog. They didn't know who she was. They didn't know what Max was capable of. All they saw was someone they thought they could mess with. The lead biker slowed down as he got closer to Emily. He gestured to his friends, and they all started to slow down too. They pulled their bikes over to the side of the road, just a few feet ahead of where Emily was walking. The engines were still rumbling loudly, filling the quiet evening air with their harsh noise. Max stopped. Emily could feel his body tense slightly, as if he was preparing for something. She trusted him completely, So when Max stopped, Emily stopped too. She couldn't see the bikers, but she could hear them. They were close, too close for comfort. One of the bikers revved his engine, the sound loud and aggressive. Another one laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that made Emily feel uneasy. She didn't know what they wanted, but she could sense that they weren't friendly. Max stood at her side, his body tense, his eyes focused on the bikers. He was ready. A low rumble filled the air in the distance. It started soft, like thunder, and grew louder as it came closer. The sound of engines roared, breaking the calm of the evening. Emily heard it clearly: 3 motorcycles. The bikers were coming closer, and from the noise, she knew they were speeding toward her. The sound of their bikes was not like the usual sounds she heard in the quiet town. These engines were loud, rough, and filled with power. The motorcycles grew louder, and Emily felt Max tense up beside her. She trusted him with her life. Max had always been alert, his senses sharp. He could hear things she couldn't, and he knew when something was wrong before she even noticed. The bikers had arrived. Emily could hear the motorcycles stop, one by one. She could imagine them pulling off to the side of the road, their engines still running, the sound vibrating through the air. She heard them laugh, too, their voices loud and rude. They were clearly enjoying themselves, but there was something in the way they laughed that made Emily's gut tighten. She could feel the change in the air. There was no longer peace in the street. She didn't know why, but she could sense trouble coming. Max's body was tense, his muscles tight. He was ready. Emily continued walking slowly, her steps confident but careful. She didn't stop because of the noise. She didn't flinch or turn back. Max was with her, and that was all she needed. She didn't care about the bikers. She had dealt with people like them before, people who thought that because she was blind, she was weak. But she knew better. She had lived through too much to be afraid of anyone or anything. The bikers began to speak, their voices filled with mockery and teasing. They didn't know who she was, and that was their first mistake. "Hey, lady, you lost or something?" a voice called out. Emily could hear the smirk in the man's voice, the tone of someone trying to be funny at the expense of someone else. She didn't respond. She kept walking, her head held high, ignoring the words as they floated through the air. The man's voice sounded again, closer now. "What's wrong with you? Can't see where you're going." The sound of his footsteps echoed as he stepped closer, getting into her space. Emily could hear him move in front of her. She knew that he was standing right there, blocking her way. She didn't stop. She kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Max growled softly beside her, a low, warning sound. Emily could feel the vibration in his chest, the heat of his body as he shifted his weight. Max was always protective, but he only growled when he felt that something wasn't right. Emily knew that he would do anything to protect her, but she didn't want him to get into a fight unless it was absolutely necessary. The man laughed, clearly enjoying the attention. "You think your dog is gonna protect you, lady?" he mocked, stepping closer, getting more in her space. "What's your dog gonna do, huh? Bite me?" The other bikers were laughing too, their voices mixing with the sound of their motorcycles, making the whole scene feel loud and chaotic. Emily's heart beat faster, but not because she was afraid. She felt anger building up inside her. Why did people always have to make assumptions about her just because she was blind? Why did they think she was weak and helpless? She wasn't weak. She had strength, and she had Max. Max wasn't just a service dog. He wasn't just a guide for her in the world. He was trained in many things, and some of those things were things no one expected from a dog. He had been through tough situations before, situations where he had to protect not just her, but others. He had trained with the best, and he had been a hero in his past. He was smart, quick, and strong. More than anything, Max was loyal. He would never leave Emily's side, no matter what. Emily could feel Max's muscles tighten next to her. She could feel his eyes, always alert, scanning the situation. She knew he was ready. And though she couldn't see the bikers, she didn't need to. She could hear them and feel the tension in the air. But she kept walking. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her react. She was not afraid. The man in front of her took a step closer, still blocking her way. Emily could hear the sound of his boots scraping against the pavement as he moved. His voice was louder now, teasing, like he thought he had won. "What's the matter, lady? You're not even looking where you're going. You can't see. You're just a blind woman out here, with your stupid dog." Emily's grip tightened on Max's leash. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Max was already in action. His body shifted, and Emily felt the tension leave his muscles. The man was close enough now that Max could react. And Max wasn't going to stand by while someone tried to scare them. "Max," Emily said softly, her voice calm and steady. It was all she needed to say. Max moved with a speed that no one could have expected from such a large dog. With a low growl, he stepped in front of Emily, his body a solid wall of muscle between her and the man. Max stood firm, his eyes locked onto the man's, not giving an inch. The man paused, taken aback by the sudden move. He wasn't expecting the dog to act so fast, so aggressively. He had thought Max was just a pet, a blind woman's helper. He had no idea that Max was so much more. The other bikers stopped laughing. They looked at each other, unsure of what to do. They had come to have fun, to mess with someone they thought was easy. But now they were unsure. They had underestimated Emily and her dog, and they didn't know how to handle it. The man took a step back, his face changing from a smirk to a look of confusion. Emily could feel his hesitation. She didn't need to see it, she could hear it in his footsteps and feel it in the air. He had expected her to be weak, to be scared. But Emily wasn't scared. And Max wasn't backing down. "You better move, man," one of the other bikers called out, his voice low and uncertain. "She's got that dog trained, I think." The man in front of Emily finally spoke again, though his voice was no longer mocking. "Whatever. I was just having some fun," he muttered, stepping aside. The other bikers followed suit, moving their bikes and taking a few steps back. But Emily didn't stop walking. She didn't thank them. She didn't say a word. She just kept walking, her steps sure and steady, with Max by her side. They had won. Not with violence, not with anger, but with confidence and strength. The bikers watched them go, unsure of what had just happened. They had expected to intimidate Emily, to make her feel small. But instead, they had been the ones who backed down. Max gave one last glance at the group, a low growl still vibrating in his chest. Then, with a small tug on his leash, Emily continued on her path. They had faced the challenge, and they had come out stronger for it. Emily wasn't just a blind woman. She was a woman who knew her worth, who trusted her dog and herself. And no one, no matter how big or loud they were, would ever take that away from her. The sun was almost set now, casting long shadows across the street. Emily and Max walked on, the world quiet again, but this time with a new understanding. The bikers had learned something important. Emily and Max were not to be underestimated. And as the street grew darker, Emily knew that no matter what came next, she and Max would face it together. The lead biker wasn't done yet. He wasn't finished making fun of her. He stepped forward, getting even closer. "You and your mutt need a ride," he sneered, his voice sharp and mocking. Emily could hear the sound of his boots on the sidewalk, getting nearer. She could feel his presence, feel his eyes watching her, but she didn't flinch. She didn't turn around. She stood tall, her feet planted firmly on the ground. Max stood beside her, completely still, but his body was tense. He could sense the danger. Emily didn't need to see the biker. She didn't need to see his mocking face or his sneer. She could feel it in the way the air changed, in the way Max's muscles tightened. She trusted him. He had been with her for years. He was not just a dog, he was a protector, a partner. And Max knew exactly what to do. Emily could feel the other bikers behind her too. She could hear them snickering, their laughter filling the air like thick smoke. They were waiting for her to react, waiting for her to show fear. They thought they could scare her. They thought that because she was blind, she was weak, that she was an easy target. But that was the last thing they were going to get from her. As the lead biker moved closer, Emily didn't even flinch. She remained calm, like she was waiting for him to make his move. The others were still laughing, but it felt different now. The laughter wasn't as loud. It wasn't as confident. They were starting to realize something: Emily wasn't afraid of them. And she wasn't going to let them control the situation. The lead biker didn't stop. He kept walking closer until he was almost right in front of Emily. His shadow was long in the setting sun, but Emily didn't move. She didn't step back. She just stood there, still as a statue. She didn't have to see him to know what he was doing. She could hear every movement, every sound he made. She could feel the way his energy shifted, how he got closer to her, thinking she would back down. He reached out, his hand moving toward her arm, as if he were going to grab her. It wasn't fast, but it was clear. He thought he could control the situation. He thought that because she couldn't see, he could do whatever he wanted. But that's when Max reacted. Max's growl was deep and low. It came from deep in his chest, a rumble that sent a shock through the air. It was so loud and powerful that it seemed to stop time for a moment. The bikers' laughter stopped. The noise around them grew silent. Even the wind seemed to still. The biker's hand froze in the air, just inches from Emily's arm. His body stiffened, and for a brief second, it felt like the whole world paused. Emily could feel Max's muscles under her hand. She could feel the tension in his body, the way he was ready to act. She didn't need to see the biker's face to know what was happening. She could tell from the way Max stood, from the deep growl in his throat, that the biker was suddenly aware that he had gone too far. The biker stood frozen for a moment, his hands still in the air. He was unsure. He wasn't expecting the dog to react like that. He thought Max was just a regular service dog, a blind woman's helper. But Max wasn't just a regular dog. He wasn't just her eyes. He was trained to protect, to guard, to stop threats. And in that moment, the biker realized he was facing something much stronger than he had expected. The silence in the air stretched, and Emily didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. She knew what she had to do. Max had already made his point. But Emily's voice broke the silence. It was calm, steady, and unwavering. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said softly, her voice low but firm. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. She was confident, and her words carried the weight of experience. She had been in situations like this before, and she knew exactly what she was doing. The biker's hand hung in the air, frozen for a moment. He had expected Emily to be afraid, to shrink away from him. But she didn't. She was standing her ground. Max was ready to defend her, but Emily didn't need to raise her voice or make a big show of it. She just let Max's growl do the talking. The biker took a step back, his body tense but unsure. He wasn't expecting this. He had thought that because Emily was blind, she would be helpless. He thought that because she couldn't see, she wouldn't be able to stand up for herself. But he had underestimated her. He had underestimated Max. For a moment, the biker stood there, not sure what to do next. Emily could feel the hesitation in the air. It wasn't the same confidence he had before. The bikers behind him were no longer laughing. The sound of their snickering had faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. They were starting to realize that this wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. The biker glanced back at his friends, who were now looking at him with a mix of confusion and surprise. They hadn't expected Max to react the way he did. They hadn't expected Emily to stand her ground. They had come to mess with her, to intimidate her, but now they were the ones who were unsure. Max didn't move. He stayed in front of Emily, standing tall and strong, his body like a wall between her and the biker. His eyes never left the man, his focus intense. Max wasn't going to let anyone hurt Emily. He was her protector, and he would do whatever it took to keep her safe. The biker hesitated, looking from Max to Emily and back again. He had thought he could get away with this, that he could push her around. But now, he was beginning to realize that he was not dealing with someone easy. He was dealing with someone who had strength, who had control over the situation. Emily wasn't helpless, and neither was Max. "I said, we're fine," Emily repeated softly, her voice calm and steady. She didn't yell. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Her words were enough. The biker's hand finally lowered, his face still unsure. He looked at Max one last time, his expression changing. It wasn't a look of anger anymore. It was a look of confusion, maybe even a little fear. He had expected to win, but now, he wasn't so sure. Max gave another soft growl, just a low warning sound, and the biker stepped back. He looked at the other bikers, who were all watching the scene unfold. The silence stretched between them. Emily could feel the weight of their stares, but she didn't flinch. She didn't back down. She was confident, calm, and in control. The lead biker took a step back, his eyes flicking nervously between Emily and Max. He wasn't ready to back off completely, but he knew better than to push it further. He had been wrong. He had thought he could scare Emily, that he could make her afraid. But now, he wasn't so sure. "I'll let you be," the biker muttered, his voice lower now, his swagger gone. He turned and walked back to his motorcycle, his friends following him, their footsteps heavier, slower. They weren't laughing anymore. The energy in the air had completely shifted. Emily didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She had already shown them that she wasn't someone to mess with. Max was by her side, as always, ready to protect her if anything happened. But for now, it seemed like the threat was over. As the bikers got on their motorcycles and revved the engines to leave, Emily turned her head slightly, feeling the change in the air. She didn't know where they were going, but she knew they wouldn't be bothering her anymore. Max kept his watchful eyes on the bikers as they left. Emily could feel the calm return to the street, the noise of the engines fading into the distance. They had faced the challenge, and they had come out on top. And as the bikers disappeared into the night, Emily knew they wouldn't be underestimating her or Max again. The biker, still trying to act tough, sneered at Emily once more, but this time, something about the way Max stood caught his attention. The dog was completely still, like a statue, but it was watching the biker with sharp, focused eyes. The way Max's body was tense, ready to act if needed, made the biker pause for a moment. He shifted his weight, his smirk faltering. "What's your deal, lady?" The biker snapped, his voice full of anger, but also uncertainty. He tried to shake off the unease creeping up on him. "Can't you control your mutt?" Emily didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she turned her head slightly in the biker's direction, her posture straight and calm. It was clear she was in control of the situation, not him. And then she spoke, her voice steady but firm, leaving no room for doubt. Max isn't just a guide dog, she said slowly, making sure he heard every word. He's a retired canine police officer, trained for situations exactly like this. The words hit like a sudden gust of wind. The laughter from the other bikers, which had filled the air just moments before, died instantly. It was as if someone had pressed mute on the world around them. The bikers froze, staring at Emily and Max, their eyes wide with disbelief. The lead biker's smirk disappeared, and his face turned pale. He took a step back, his body stiff with shock. It was clear now that he hadn't expected this. He had assumed that Max was just another service dog, a companion for a blind woman. But now, he was realizing that Max wasn't just a dog. He wasn't just any ordinary animal. Max had been trained for real work that could stop a threat in its tracks. The biker's eyes shifted between Emily and Max, but it was clear that his confidence was gone. He could see the way Max stood, completely alert, eyes locked on him with laser-like focus. Every muscle in Max's body was ready to spring into action. The dog wasn't just standing there, it was waiting, prepared for anything. It was like the calm before a storm, and the biker felt the weight of it. Max was no longer just a guide dog. He was a trained protector, a retired canine officer who had worked in the toughest situations, keeping people safe from danger. This wasn't a dog who would back down or hesitate. And now the biker knew that if he made one wrong move, things could turn very bad for him. Before the lead biker could react, one of his friends, a younger man who had been silent until now, muttered under his breath, his voice low but urgent, "We should go now." The words hung in the air, and the bikers exchanged quick, nervous glances. They had come here to mess with a blind woman and her dog, to have some fun at her expense. But now they were realizing that they were the ones in danger, not Emily. They hadn't expected a retired police dog to be standing between them and their target. They hadn't expected the dog to be so serious, so prepared. They hadn't expected Emily to be so calm, so in control. The leader of the bikers opened his mouth to say something, but then he stopped. He seemed to be weighing his options, looking from Emily to Max and back again. The tension in the air was thick, heavy, and the bikers knew they weren't going to win this. They weren't going to get the reaction they wanted from Emily. They weren't going to scare her. And they certainly weren't going to intimidate Max. The younger biker spoke again, his voice more insistent this time. "I'm serious, man. Let's go. This isn't worth it." The lead biker glanced at him, then at the other bikers. They all seemed to be on the same page now, their tough exteriors cracking. The fun was gone. The game had stopped. The reality of the situation had sunk in. Max's stance hadn't changed. He was still standing tall, his eyes fixed on the biker, watching him closely. The dog's eyes weren't full of fear. They weren't even full of anger. They were just steady, unwavering, and full of purpose. Max wasn't going to let anyone harm Emily. He wasn't going to let anyone think for a second that they could mess with her. Finally, the lead biker turned around. He didn't say another word. Without another glance at Emily or Max, he walked back to his motorcycle, his steps heavy and slow. The other bikers followed him, their faces still showing traces of the unease they were feeling. They got on their bikes one by one, all of them making sure to keep their distance from Emily and Max. As they revved their engines and began to pull away, Emily stood there, unmoving, as calm as ever. Max stayed by her side, his watchful eyes never leaving the bikers until they were out of sight. The air slowly returned to normal, the tension dissipating as the sounds of the motorcycles faded into the distance. Emily didn't need to say anything. She didn't need to explain anything. She knew that the bikers had learned their lesson. They had thought they could mess with her, but now they knew better. Now, they knew that Emily and Max were not to be underestimated. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a trained officer, a protector, and a partner. And Emily wasn't someone to be toyed with. As the street returned to its usual quiet, Emily turned her head slightly, feeling the calmness settle back around her. She took a deep breath, and then, without missing a beat, she continued her walk down the sidewalk. Max stayed at her side, just as he always did, guiding her through the world around her. The bikers had thought they could intimidate her, but they had learned the hard way that Emily Hartley wasn't someone who could be pushed around. With Max by her side, she was never truly alone. And that was a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. The bikers were quick to realize they had made a huge mistake. They had come thinking it would be easy to intimidate a blind woman and her dog, but instead, they were the ones who felt the fear. Max, the retired canine officer, had shown them just how wrong they were. His calm yet strong presence was enough to make them think twice about their actions. As the tension slowly lifted, the lead biker, who had been so confident just moments ago, took a deep breath. His smirk was gone, replaced by a look of uncertainty. He looked down at the ground, then back at Max, who was still standing tall beside Emily. The biker could feel the weight of the situation sinking in, and for the first time, he realized they were not the ones in control here. He mumbled something about a mistake, his words almost too soft to hear. He didn't dare say anything else. Without another word, he turned quickly and walked toward his motorcycle, his steps hurried and uncertain. His friends, who had been laughing and enjoying the show just moments before, followed him without question. There were no more jokes, no more taunts. The fun was over. The other bikers started their engines one by one, the roar of the motorcycles echoing down the street. But it wasn't the same as before. This time, their engines didn't sound so loud or powerful. They didn't have the same confidence. They were leaving, retreating. They knew they had crossed a line, and they were getting out of there before things got worse. As the group of bikers sped off, their motorcycles growing smaller in the distance, Emily stood still for a moment. She didn't move. She didn't need to. She had already won. The bikers had thought they could mess with her, with Max. But now they knew better. They knew that Emily Hartley and her service dog were not to be underestimated. Max stayed by her side, his body relaxed but still alert. His tail gave a small, almost imperceptible wag, a sign that he was content. To him, it was just another day on the job. His job wasn't just to guide Emily, it was to protect her, to make sure no one could harm her. And he had done just that. Emily's hand rested gently on Max's head, her fingers running through his fur in a slow, soothing motion. She smiled softly, her voice low and affectionate. "Good boy," she whispered, her words full of gratitude and pride. Max, in his quiet way, seemed to understand. His eyes softened, and his tail wagged again, this time a little more noticeably, like he was happy to have done his job well. For a moment, Emily just stood there, feeling the warmth of the evening sun on her face and the comfort of Max's presence beside her. The street was quiet again, the noise of the bikers and their engines fading away into the distance. All that remained was the peaceful rhythm of the world around them, the sound of birds in the trees, the rustling of leaves in the wind, and the soft tapping of Max's paws on the pavement as they continued their walk. It had been a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Emily didn't need to fight back with anger or violence. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She simply stood her ground, confident in the fact that she wasn't alone. Max was there with her, always by her side, and that was more than enough. As the last of the bikers disappeared from view, Emily continued down the sidewalk, her steps steady and sure. Max led the way, guiding her through the world as he always did. Emily had faced the bikers' taunts before, but this time was different. This time, she had been able to rely on more than just her own strength. She had Max, a loyal companion who was always ready to protect her. The small town that had once seemed so peaceful and quiet had been shaken for a brief moment, but now it was back to its normal rhythm. People went about their business, unaware of what had just happened, unaware of the courage and strength that had been on display just moments before. But Emily knew. She knew that Max had once again proven just how much he meant to her. He wasn't just a dog. He was her protector, her friend, and her partner. As they turned the corner, heading toward the park where Emily liked to sit and enjoy the calmness of the evening, she felt a sense of pride and peace settle over her. The bikers had learned a valuable lesson, one they wouldn't soon forget. But more importantly, Emily had been reminded of something important, that she was never truly alone, not with Max by her side. They made their way to a bench by the fountain in the park, and Emily sat down, resting her hands on her lap. Max lay down beside her, his head resting on his paws, content and calm. For a while, they just sat there in silence, enjoying the peaceful evening and the quiet around them. Emily could feel the warmth of the sun on her skin, the soft breeze in the air, and the gentle presence of Max beside her. She had faced the bikers and come out on top, not because she had been stronger or braver than them, but because she had Max, a dog who had been trained to protect, who had been by her side through it all. He had been the silent hero of the day. And Emily couldn't have been prouder. Justice had been served, not in the way that most people might expect, but in a way that mattered more. The bikers had learned that there were some people, some situations, that were not to be taken lightly. And they would think twice before trying to mess with someone like Emily Hartley again. As the evening wore on and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Emily felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't just a blind woman with a dog. She was someone with strength, with courage, and with a companion who would always have her back. And that was all she needed. The world around her was calm, and so was she. Max was right there, as always, by her side. And together, they would face whatever came next, just as they always had. As Emily and Max made their way down the quiet street, the evening light faded behind them, leaving a soft purple hue across the sky. The soft clicking of Max's paws against the pavement was the only sound that filled the air. Emily's heart felt light, almost as if the world around her had grown even more peaceful after the encounter with the bikers. Her mind wandered, as it often did when she walked alone with Max, reflecting on the many moments of her life that had been filled with challenges. She had faced many difficult situations, some of them too personal to mention, some of them too painful to think about. But through it all, Max had always been there, steady, reliable, and protective. No matter how difficult life had been, Max had been her rock, her anchor. She glanced down at him now, the way his big ears perked up at the sound of a distant car, the way his body moved smoothly with each step. Max was more than just a guide dog, he was a friend, a companion, a guardian. He had seen her through so many ups and downs, and today had only added to that growing list of memories. Today, they had stood together and faced a group of bikers who had thought they could intimidate her. But instead, the bikers had learned a powerful lesson: don't judge a book by its cover. People often assumed that Emily, because she was blind, was weak, or that she needed help in ways that she didn't. But the truth was, Emily was strong. She had fought for her independence, learned to live in a world that was sometimes too fast, too noisy, and too overwhelming. And with Max by her side, she had come to realize that there was nothing she couldn't do. Max, as a retired canine officer, had been trained to handle danger and protect his partner in the most difficult situations. But Emily also knew that his loyalty to her wasn't just because of his training. It was because they shared a bond that went beyond words, beyond tasks. Max wasn't just a dog doing a job. He was her protector, her partner, and her friend. As Emily continued walking, a soft breeze tugged at her hair, and she smiled. She had lived through so many things in her life, but it was in moments like this when she was walking alongside Max that she truly understood the power of what they had together. It wasn't just the dog who had helped her. It was their teamwork, their trust in each other, that made them unstoppable. There was a lesson in today's experience, one that Emily carried with her every day. Sometimes, people look at others and think they know their story. They think they can see someone's weaknesses or vulnerabilities just by looking at them. But those people are often wrong. They don't see the strength that comes from within. They don't see the bond between a person and their loyal companion. They don't understand what makes someone truly powerful. It was that strength that had kept Emily going when times were tough. It was the same strength that had kept her from backing down when the bikers had tried to intimidate her. They hadn't known who they were dealing with. They hadn't known that Emily wasn't alone. They hadn't known that Max, with his sharp instincts and unwavering loyalty, was always by her side. And this, Emily thought, was the real power. It wasn't in fighting back with force or anger. It was in standing firm, in showing the world that no matter what happened, she wouldn't be broken. It was in the quiet, steady strength that came from knowing who she was and from knowing that, with Max by her side, she had everything she needed to face whatever came next. She thought about the bikers. They had come with arrogance, assuming they could take advantage of someone they saw as weak. But in the end, it wasn't the loudest or the toughest person who had won. It was the one who had been patient, the one who had stood their ground and showed that they weren't afraid. Emily had done that with grace and calm. She had stood firm, not with anger, but with quiet strength. And in doing so, she had shown the bikers something they would never forget. Life wasn't always about facing challenges head-on with brute force. Sometimes, it was about knowing that you had the ability to stand your ground and trust that your support, whether in the form of a loyal dog or a strong community, was all you needed. Emily and Max were a reminder of that. As they walked through the neighborhood, passing familiar houses and quiet streets, Emily thought about how many times in her life she had been underestimated. She thought about how many times she had been told what she couldn't do, or how many times people had assumed she was weak. But she had never let those opinions define her. She had always known, deep down, that she was capable of more than anyone could imagine. Her blindness didn't make her weak. It made her stronger in ways others could never understand. It made her rely on her senses in different ways, made her more in tune with the world around her. And with Max's help, she had learned to navigate that world with confidence. Emily knew that the world was full of challenges. There would always be people who tried to bring others down, to make them feel small or weak. But Emily also knew that those who truly mattered would always see the truth. They would see the strength in others, even when others couldn't see it themselves. They would see the power of resilience, of standing tall even when it felt like everything was working against them. She had learned that lesson early on in her life, and it was one she would carry with her forever. She had learned that her worth wasn't determined by what others thought of her, but by what she knew to be true about herself. She was strong. She was capable. And she had Max, a partner who would always have her back. As they finally reached her home, Emily paused for a moment, taking in the quiet beauty of the night. The stars twinkled above, and the world felt peaceful again. She turned to Max, reaching down to give him a gentle pat on the head. "We make a good team," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. Max looked up at her, his eyes soft and calm, as if he understood every word. He wagged his tail slightly, then leaned against her as they walked inside together, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Emily didn't know what the future held, but she was no longer afraid. She knew that no matter what, she and Max would face it together. And that, she thought, was the greatest strength of all. In a world where people often judge too quickly, Emily had learned to trust in herself, to trust in Max, and to never let anyone tell her what she couldn't do. Because, in the end, the people who judge others too harshly are the ones who never truly understand. It was always the quiet strength that won in the end.